the Roman Empire's secret strategy that no enemy ever defeated. The forest was silent for only a moment. Then came the screams. Somewhere deep inside the darkness of ancient Germania, thousands of Roman soldiers were dying in the mud, unable to see the enemy cutting them apart through rain, fog, and collapsing trees. Eagles carrying the pride of Rome vanished into chaos. Veterans who had conquered entire nations suddenly panicked like trapped animals. Officers shouted orders no one could hear. Shields slipped from blood-soaked hands. Horses crashed into fleeing men. One legion disappeared, then another, then another. By the end of the massacre, the unstoppable power of Rome had been shattered, or at least that is what the world believed, because this should have been the end. No empire in the ancient world could survive a catastrophe like this. Entire civilizations had collapsed for far less. Kings lost single battles and watched their kingdoms burn within months. But Rome was different, terrifyingly different. The most disturbing part of Roman history is not that Rome conquered the world. It is that Rome kept surviving disasters that should have destroyed it forever. Again and again, enemies celebrated victory over Rome, believing they had broken the empire at last. Hannibal annihilated Roman armies so completely that the dead covered entire battlefields from horizon to horizon. Germanic tribes slaughtered elite legions in forests Rome feared for generations. Rebellions erupted. Civil wars consumed the Republic. Emperors were assassinated. Cities revolted. Armies betrayed their commanders. And yet Rome always returned. Stronger, colder, more dangerous than before. Why? What secret did Rome understand that no rival empire ever truly learned? Because the Roman Empire did not survive through strength alone. Its real power was hidden beneath the armor, beneath the banners, beneath the glory of its victories. Rome discovered a strategy so effective that it transformed defeat into fuel, fear into control, and chaos into expansion. While its enemies fought battles, Rome fought something much larger. Something almost invisible, a system, an empire designed not merely to win wars, but to outlast entire civilizations. Tonight, you are going to enter that machine. You will witness how Rome manipulated fear, weaponized time, absorbed the strengths of its enemies, and created a structure so resilient that even its worst disasters became part of its expansion. You will see why kingdoms that defeated Rome eventually disappeared into history, while Rome continued marching forward across continents for centuries. And the deeper we go into this story, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Because Rome's greatest strategy never truly died. The day Rome was supposed to die, the rain would not stop. Cold water poured through the forests of Germania as exhausted Roman soldiers struggled to march through narrow trails turned into rivers of mud. Their armor grew heavier with every step. Supply wagons collapsed. Horses slipped. Visibility vanished behind thick fog and towering trees that seemed to close around the army like a trap designed by nature itself. And somewhere beyond the darkness, unseen eyes watched every movement. The Roman commander Publius Quinctilius Varus believed he was marching through Allied territory. He believed Rome still controlled these lands. After all, Rome controlled almost everything. From the deserts of the east to the coasts of Hispania, the empire appeared invincible. Its legions had crushed kingdoms, enslaved nations, and spread Roman authority across the known world. Entire peoples trembled when Roman banners appeared on the horizon. But in the year 9 AD, deep inside the Teutoburg Forest, Rome walked directly into a nightmare it did not understand. Without warning, the attack began. Spears exploded from the trees, arrows tore through the rain. Germanic warriors charged from hidden positions, vanishing back into the forest before Roman formations could stabilize. The legions could not maneuver. Their famous discipline became useless in the mud and chaos. Long shield walls broke apart between trees. Officers lost control. Panic spread faster than commands. For 3 days, Rome bled inside that forest. The weather itself seemed to fight against the empire. Exhausted soldiers drowned in marshes, while wounded men disappeared screaming into the darkness. Entire units were isolated and butchered before reinforcements could reach them. Veterans who had survived brutal campaigns across Europe suddenly faced an enemy they could neither see nor predict. Then came the moment that shocked the ancient world. 3 full Roman legions vanished, destroyed. Not weakened, not scattered, erased. For Rome, this was more than military defeat. It was psychological devastation. These were not inexperienced troops. These were elite imperial legions of the most powerful empire on earth. Their loss shattered the illusion that Rome could not be touched. When news reached Rome, panic spread through the capital itself. The Emperor Augustus reportedly wandered his palace in despair, shouting, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions!" Imagine hearing those words echo through the heart of the empire. Imagine the fear gripping Roman citizens, realizing that somewhere beyond their borders existed enemies capable of humiliating Rome itself. This should have triggered collapse. Every ancient rule of history suggested it would. But what happened next revealed the terrifying difference between Rome and every rival civilization that challenged it. Rome did not surrender to fear. Rome studied it. The empire that turned fear into fuel. Most civilizations collapse twice. The first collapse happens on the battlefield. The second happens inside the mind. That second collapse is the one that destroys empires forever. After catastrophic defeats, nations begin doubting themselves. Allies abandon them. Citizens lose confidence. Leaders panic. Armies fracture. Fear spreads faster than any invading force. History is filled with kingdoms that survived military disasters only to destroy themselves through despair afterward. Rome understood this danger better than anyone. That is why the true battlefield of the Roman Empire was never only physical, it was psychological. After the catastrophe in the Teutoburg Forest, fear spread across Rome like poison. Rumors flooded the streets. People whispered about Germanic tribes marching toward Italy itself. Parents feared invasions. Politicians blamed each other. Generals questioned Rome's expansion into hostile territory. For the first time in years, the empire looked vulnerable. But instead of allowing fear to weaken the state, Rome transformed fear into national obsession, into discipline, into rage, into unity. That was the difference. Rome possessed a terrifying ability almost no civilization in history ever mastered. It could metabolize humiliation and turn it into strength. The Roman response to disaster was never emotional surrender. It was cold adaptation. After losing entire legions in Germania, Rome did not abandon military expansion entirely. It reorganized command structures. It increased border fortifications. It restructured intelligence gathering. It studied tribal warfare. It changed how armies moved through hostile terrain. Rome treated catastrophe like information. This pattern appears again and again throughout Roman history. When Hannibal Barca annihilated Roman forces at the Battle of Cannae, the destruction was almost unimaginable. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers died in a single day. Ancient historians described piles of bodies so massive that the battlefield became nearly impassable. Entire aristocratic bloodlines vanished within hours. Some Roman allies immediately considered switching sides, believing the Republic had reached its end. Any normal civilization would have negotiated peace. Rome refused. Instead, Rome reacted with terrifying calm. The Senate banned public mourning to prevent psychological collapse. New armies were raised almost immediately. Teenagers, elderly men, freed slaves, and citizens previously considered unfit for service were recruited to replace the dead. While Hannibal expected surrender, Rome focused on endurance. That decision changed world history because Rome understood something its enemies never fully grasped. A battle could be lost, a war could still continue. The Roman mind operated differently from the kingdoms surrounding it. Most ancient powers were built around individual rulers, single armies, or temporary alliances. Destroy the king, and the kingdom collapsed. Destroy the army, and resistance ended. But Rome had slowly transformed itself into something larger than individual men. A machine. One defeat could not stop it because the system itself survived. And that system fed on crisis. The more Rome suffered, the more ruthless it became. Fear stopped being weakness and became motivation. Defeat stopped being shame and became instruction. Every humiliation created pressure inside Roman society, forcing it to evolve faster, organize harder, and fight longer than anyone expected. That is what made Rome so dangerous. Not invincibility, adaptation under pressure. Its enemies celebrated victories believing Rome was finally dying, while Rome was already rebuilding stronger behind the scenes. And slowly, across centuries of warfare, the empire developed a terrifying reputation. The more you wounded Rome, the harder it became to kill. Rome's invisible battlefield. Long before Roman soldiers appeared on the horizon, Rome had already begun the war. That was the secret most enemies never understood until it was too late. They believed wars started with marching armies, flashing swords, and open battlefields. They prepared for sieges, cavalry charges, and military invasions. Kings gathered warriors. Tribal leaders formed alliances. Cities reinforced walls. Entire civilizations waited for the moment Rome would attack directly. But Rome was already inside their world long before the first legion arrived. Invisible, patient, watching. The Roman Empire did not conquer nations through military force alone. It weakened societies from the inside first. By the time war officially began, Rome often knew the enemy's weaknesses better than the enemy knew itself. That invisible battlefield became one of the most sophisticated systems of domination the ancient world had ever seen. It started with information. Roman merchants traveled across foreign territories, gathering more than trade. Diplomats listened carefully inside royal courts. Travelers observed roads, rivers, harvests, political tensions, tribal rivalries, and economic vulnerabilities. Rome collected details obsessively. Which tribes hated each other? Which rulers were unpopular? Which regions lacked food during winter? Which cities feared invasion from neighboring powers? Every weakness mattered. Because Rome understood something terrifying. An enemy divided against itself becomes easier to control than an enemy defeated in battle. Before Roman armies entered new territories, alliances often mysteriously collapsed. Rival leaders suddenly distrusted each other. Political disputes intensified. Border conflicts erupted between neighboring tribes. Rome quietly encouraged instability everywhere it looked. And while enemies focused on local rivalries, Rome expanded its influence piece by piece. This was not chaos. It was strategy. The empire mastered the art of indirect conquest. Roman diplomats promised protection to weaker kingdoms while secretly increasing dependence on Roman power. Trade agreements slowly tied foreign economies to Roman markets. Local rulers were rewarded for cooperation and isolated when they resisted. Rome offered partnership before domination, making conquest appear gradual, even inevitable. Then came the roads. At first glance, Roman roads looked like infrastructure projects designed for commerce and communication. In reality, they were instruments of psychological control. Every road carried a message. Rome can reach you whenever it wants. Legions could move across enormous distances with shocking speed. Reinforcements arrived faster than enemies expected. Rebellions that seemed successful suddenly found Roman troops appearing with terrifying efficiency. Entire populations understood that distance no longer protected them from imperial retaliation. And once people believe resistance is hopeless, Rome no longer needs to conquer them physically. Fear does the work instead. The empire also understood the power of reputation. Stories of Roman punishment spread across continents. Cities that resisted Rome and lost were sometimes destroyed so completely that neighboring territories surrendered without battle afterward. The memory of Roman retaliation became a weapon more effective than many armies. This psychological warfare saved Rome enormous resources. Why fight 10 wars when terror from one victory can prevent the other 9? But the most brilliant part of Rome's invisible battlefield was patience. Most kingdoms wanted immediate glory, immediate expansion, immediate revenge. Rome thought in generations. If direct conquest failed, Rome waited. If alliances collapsed, Rome rebuilt them. If enemies resisted fiercely, Rome weakened them slowly through economics, diplomacy, internal pressure, and time itself. That patience made Rome almost impossible to exhaust. Its enemies fought emotionally. Rome fought systematically. And somewhere beyond the visible battlefields of history, while kings dreamed of military victories, Rome was quietly constructing a network of influence so vast that entire civilizations were being surrounded without realizing it. By the time the legions finally marched through the gates, the war was often already over. Why Rome wanted its enemies to resist? Most empires feared rebellion. Rome often benefited from it. That sounds impossible at first. Why would the most powerful empire in the ancient world allow resistance to grow inside its territories? Why risk uprisings, revolts, and civil unrest when total obedience seemed safer? Because Rome discovered something deeply unsettling about power. An enemy that rebels openly becomes easier to control than an enemy silently waiting in the shadows. The Roman Empire understood that resistance could be transformed into opportunity. Every revolt created justification for expansion, military occupation, political restructuring, economic seizure, and harsher control. Rebellion gave Rome permission to become stronger. And once you recognize this pattern, Roman history begins to look completely different. Take the example of Judea. Tension between Roman authority and the local population had existed for years. Taxes increased. Roman influence expanded. Cultural and religious anger slowly intensified beneath the surface. Rome knew the region was unstable. It knew resistance movements were forming. It knew rebellion was becoming inevitable. Yet instead of immediately eliminating every threat, Rome allowed pressure to build. Then the explosion came. The Great Jewish Revolt erupted in 66 AD with fury so intense that Roman forces initially suffered humiliating losses. Entire garrisons were overwhelmed. Rebel groups seized control of key cities. Across the empire, many believed Rome had finally encountered a resistance movement capable of permanently destabilizing the eastern provinces. But Rome did not react emotionally. It reacted methodically. The empire unleashed overwhelming force with terrifying precision. Massive armies entered the region. Towns suspected of aiding resistance were crushed. Supply lines were cut. Rebel factions were isolated from one another. Rome transformed the rebellion into a brutal demonstration of imperial power that echoed across the ancient world. Then came the siege of Jerusalem. Starvation consumed the city before Roman soldiers even breached the walls. Internal divisions among defenders turned desperation into chaos. Families fought over food. Political factions inside the city attacked each other while Roman forces waited outside patiently, tightening the noose day after day. Rome understood that divided enemies destroy themselves faster than armies can destroy them. When Jerusalem finally fell, the destruction became legendary. The Second Temple was burned. Survivors were enslaved or scattered. The rebellion that once threatened Roman authority ended by strengthening Rome's control over the region even further. And this pattern repeated constantly across the empire. Rebellion exposed future enemies before they could become larger threats. Resistance revealed disloyal leaders. Civil unrest justified permanent military presence. Failed revolts terrified neighboring territories into obedience. Rome weaponized reaction itself. The empire rarely rushed blindly into suppression. Instead, it often allowed resistance movements to reveal their networks, allies, ambitions, and weaknesses before striking decisively. Rome understood patience better than rage. That patience made its retaliation horrifyingly effective. But there was another reason Rome benefited from resistance. Fear unified the empire internally. Whenever major rebellions erupted, Roman citizens became more willing to accept military expansion, stronger leadership, emergency powers, and harsher laws in exchange for stability. External threats strengthened Roman identity. Fear reminded citizens why Rome believed absolute control was necessary. And slowly, across generations, the empire developed a system where conflict itself became fuel for imperial growth. The more enemies resisted Rome, the more reasons Rome had to expand. This created a terrifying cycle. Rome needed threats to justify power. Power created more resentment. Resentment created more rebellion. And every rebellion allowed Rome to tighten its grip even further. To the outside world, Rome appeared constantly under attack. But beneath the surface, the empire was transforming resistance into one of its greatest strategic advantages. And the civilizations fighting against Rome never realized something deeply dangerous. Every rebellion was teaching Rome how to control them more effectively next time. The Roman art of stealing power. Most civilizations protected their identity. Rome consumed identities. That was one of the most unsettling reasons the empire became unstoppable. Ancient kingdoms often believed strength came from preserving tradition. Their weapons, gods, military tactics, languages, and political systems became symbols of pride. To copy outsiders was seen as weakness. To imitate enemies was humiliation. Rome saw the world differently. Rome believed every successful enemy possessed something worth stealing. And that mindset changed history. The empire did not rise because Romans believed they were naturally superior to everyone else. Rome rose because it learned faster than the civilizations surrounding it. Every war became a classroom. Every defeat became instruction. Every foreign culture became a source of potential power waiting to be absorbed into the Roman machine. That adaptability made Rome terrifyingly unpredictable. When Rome encountered stronger naval powers during the Punic Wars, it faced a humiliating reality. Carthage controlled the sea. Roman soldiers were unmatched on land, but Roman fleets lacked experience, maneuverability, and tactical sophistication. Carthaginian commanders dominated naval warfare with confidence. Most empires would have accepted their weakness. Rome studied it instead. According to ancient accounts, the Romans captured a damaged Carthaginian ship and copied it piece by piece. They reverse-engineered enemy technology with ruthless practicality. Shipyards exploded into activity. Massive fleets were constructed at astonishing speed. Roman crews trained relentlessly, transforming inexperienced recruits into naval forces capable of challenging the greatest maritime power in the Mediterranean. Then Rome did something even more brilliant. Instead of trying to outmatch Carthage in traditional naval maneuvering, Rome changed the nature of naval combat entirely. The empire introduced boarding bridges known as corvus devices, turning sea battles into close-quarters infantry combat where Roman discipline gave them the advantage. Rome did not merely imitate enemies. It reshaped warfare around Roman strengths. That pattern appears everywhere in Roman expansion. Rome adopted cavalry techniques from rival cultures. It absorbed engineering innovations from conquered territories. It integrated foreign gods into Roman religious life. It borrowed political structures, military formations, siege technologies, and administrative systems from civilizations it defeated. Even Roman armor evolved constantly, because the empire never stopped learning from the battlefield. This was not cultural weakness. It was strategic predation. Rome treated the ancient world like an enormous reservoir of useful ideas. Anything effective could become Roman. Anything powerful could be integrated into the empire. Conquest was not simply territorial expansion, it was intellectual absorption, and that made resistance extraordinarily difficult. Because enemies fighting Rome eventually discovered something horrifying. Their own strengths could later be turned against them. The empire evolved after every encounter. Fight Rome with superior cavalry, and Rome improves its cavalry. Defeat Roman armies with new weapons, and Roman blacksmiths begin producing those weapons themselves. Use innovative battlefield tactics successfully once, and Roman commanders study them obsessively until they master them better than the original creators. Rome had no pride when it came to survival, only ambition. That flexibility separated Rome from many ancient powers trapped by tradition. While rival kingdoms remained rigid, Rome constantly transformed. The empire became stronger with every war because every enemy unknowingly contributed to Roman evolution. Over centuries, Rome slowly became something larger than a single civilization. It became a fusion of conquered worlds, Greek knowledge, Carthaginian naval influence, Egyptian wealth, Gallic military adaptation, Eastern administrative systems, foreign engineering, foreign religions, foreign manpower. Everything flowed into Rome eventually, and that created one of the greatest paradoxes in human history. The Roman Empire conquered countless civilizations by becoming all of them at once. The strategy hidden inside Roman roads. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Stone paths cutting across forests, mountains, deserts, and open plains. Thousands of miles of roads stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Traders used them, travelers crossed them, messengers moved across them carrying imperial orders from one side of the empire to another. Most people saw infrastructure. Rome saw domination. Because Roman roads were never built merely for transportation. They were psychological weapons designed to project power, accelerate fear, and convince entire civilizations that resistance against Rome was hopeless. Every road carried the shadow of the legion. Imagine living in a distant village somewhere near the edge of the empire. News arrives that a neighboring city has rebelled against Roman authority. For a brief moment, hope spreads. Maybe Rome is weakening. Maybe this is the beginning of liberation. Then the roads begin to shake. Not days later, not weeks later. Hours. Thousands of Roman soldiers appear with terrifying speed, marching in perfect formation through rain, dust, snow, or burning heat. Heavy armor glitters beneath the sun. Siege equipment rolls forward behind them. Supply wagons stretch endlessly across the horizon. Discipline radiates from every movement. Suddenly, rebellion no longer feels heroic. It feels suicidal. That was the true purpose of Roman roads. They transformed distance into control. Before Rome, geography protected civilizations. Mountains isolated kingdoms. Rivers slowed armies. Forests created natural defense barriers. Communication moved slowly across the ancient world, making centralized authority difficult to maintain. Rome changed that permanently. Its roads connected the empire like veins inside a living organism. Orders from the capital could travel across enormous distances with unprecedented efficiency. Reinforcements arrived faster than enemies expected. Supply systems became stable even during long military campaigns. Governors remained connected to imperial authority. Intelligence moved continuously between provinces. The empire could react before instability spread, and that reaction speed terrified Rome's enemies. But the roads carried something even more dangerous than soldiers. They carried inevitability. Roman engineers built roads with astonishing precision and permanence. Straight lines cut through hostile terrain as if the empire itself refused to acknowledge obstacles. Swamps were drained. Hills were carved apart. Bridges crossed dangerous rivers. Mountains were pierced with roads that seemed impossible for the ancient world to construct. The message was unmistakable. Rome does not adapt to the world. The world adapts to Rome. Even conquered populations understood the symbolism. Every new road reminded them that Roman authority was becoming permanent. The empire was not visiting. It was embedding itself into the land physically, economically, and psychologically. And once roads appeared, Roman influence followed naturally. Trade increased. Roman law spread. Roman culture expanded. Local economies became dependent on imperial systems. Military occupation became easier to sustain. Conquest no longer required constant violence because the roads themselves maintained pressure. The empire could now move armies faster than rebellions could organize. That changed warfare forever. Many ancient enemies believed victory meant defeating Roman soldiers in battle. What they failed to understand was that Rome's real strength often existed behind the front lines. Legions survived because supply chains survived. Armies advanced because infrastructure supported them. Defeats became temporary because roads allowed rapid recovery and reinforcement. Even when Rome lost battles, its logistical network remained alive. And as long as the roads existed, Rome could return. Again, and again, and again. That persistence exhausted entire civilizations. Enemies defending against Rome were not merely fighting armies. They were fighting a system capable of sustaining pressure across continents for generations. Every destroyed legion could be replaced. Every setback could be repaired. Every province remained connected to the larger imperial machine. The roads made Rome feel immortal. But there was something darker hidden beneath all this engineering brilliance. The roads that allowed Rome to dominate the world would eventually expose the empire to dangers moving in both directions. Invasions, civil wars, economic collapse, and internal instability would later travel across the very arteries Rome created for control. Because every system powerful enough to build an empire can also accelerate its collapse. The empire that weaponized time. Most kingdoms went to war searching for victory. Rome went to war searching for endurance. That single difference explains why so many enemies defeated Roman armies, yet still lost everything in the end. Ancient warfare was usually driven by emotion. Kings wanted quick glory. Generals sought decisive battles that would bring fame, wealth, and immediate surrender. Armies marched toward dramatic confrontations where entire wars could be decided in a single afternoon. Rome understood something colder. Quick victories create quick collapses. But civilizations capable of surviving long enough become terrifyingly difficult to destroy. So while other empires fought for moments, Rome fought for time itself. No enemy understood this lesson more painfully than Hannibal Barca. When Hannibal crossed the Alps during the Second Punic War, it felt almost supernatural. War elephants descended from frozen mountains into Italy itself. Roman allies panicked. Entire regions feared the collapse of Roman power. Then came the disasters. At Trebia, Rome was crushed. At Lake Trasimene, Roman armies were ambushed and annihilated. At Cannae, catastrophe reached unimaginable proportions. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers died in a single battle. Some ancient historians described rivers turning red with blood. Bodies covered the ground so densely that movement became nearly impossible. Senators, aristocrats, officers, and elite warriors disappeared within hours beneath Hannibal's encirclement tactics. Military history still studies Cannae as one of the greatest battlefield victories ever achieved. And yet, Hannibal still lost the war. Why? Because Rome refused to fight according to the emotional expectations of its enemies. After repeated disasters, Rome made a humiliating decision that enraged many citizens. Instead of seeking glorious revenge immediately, Roman leaders began avoiding large-scale direct confrontation. They adopted delay tactics, harassment campaigns, supply disruption, strategic exhaustion. Many Romans considered this cowardice. But Rome was not trying to win quickly anymore. Rome was trying to survive longer than Hannibal could sustain momentum. That shift changed everything. As years passed, Hannibal remained trapped deep inside enemy territory, far from stable reinforcements. His army weakened gradually. Supplies became harder to secure. Allied support fluctuated. Carthage struggled to fully capitalize on his victories. Meanwhile, Rome continued rebuilding. New soldiers, new resources, new armies, new strategies, again and again. The Roman state absorbed losses that would have destroyed nearly any civilization on Earth because Rome treated time as a weapon instead of a limitation. Its enemies often depended on decisive victories. Rome depended on continuity. That continuity exhausted opponents psychologically. Imagine defeating Roman armies repeatedly and still watching Rome continue marching forward. Imagine realizing that every victory costs you strength while Rome somehow continues replenishing itself. Imagine understanding that the empire you thought was collapsing has simply entered another phase of adaptation. That realization broke enemies emotionally long before it broke them militarily. And Rome expanded this philosophy beyond warfare. The empire played long political games, long economic games, long cultural games. If direct conquest proved difficult, Rome waited decades. If resistance remained strong, Rome slowly surrounded opponents economically and diplomatically. If rebellions erupted, Rome drained them gradually until exhaustion destroyed cohesion from within. Rome knew patience creates pressure, pressure creates mistakes, and civilizations under constant pressure eventually begin collapsing internally. That is why Rome appeared almost immortal for centuries. The empire built systems capable of surviving crises longer than rival powers could survive the effort required to fight them. Its enemies burned intensely. Rome endured endlessly. But there was a hidden danger inside this strategy. An empire built around permanent endurance slowly loses the ability to stop expanding, stop mobilizing, or stop fighting. Rome became addicted to survival itself. Every crisis justified greater militarization. Every external threat demanded more resources. Every generation inherited an empire locked inside continuous struggle. And over time, Rome began discovering something terrifying. A civilization that weaponizes time against its enemies may eventually weaponize exhaustion against itself. How Rome turned defeated enemies into Roman soldiers. Most empires ruled through fear alone. Rome ruled through transformation. That was the deeper strategy hidden beneath its conquests, and it may have been the most brilliant weapon the empire ever created. Because Rome did not simply defeat enemies. Rome slowly erased them, not through extermination alone, not through endless slaughter, but by turning conquered people into defenders of the empire itself. Imagine how terrifying that truly is. A civilization fights Rome for generations. Warriors die resisting imperial expansion. Entire tribes unite to defend their identity, culture, language, and independence. Blood is spilled across battlefields for decades. Hatred toward Rome grows with every campaign. Then something unexpected happens. The sons of those same enemies begin wearing Roman armor. That transformation changed the ancient world forever. Most empires remained outsiders inside conquered territory. They occupied foreign populations through military force, while cultural hostility continued beneath the surface. Rome understood that permanent domination required something far more sophisticated. It required loyalty, not temporary obedience, not fear alone. Identity. Rome became extraordinarily skilled at absorbing conquered populations into the imperial system piece by piece. Local elites were offered political influence, wealth, military rank, trade opportunities, and eventually Roman citizenship itself. Families that once resisted Rome discovered that cooperation could elevate them socially and economically beyond anything their old tribal systems allowed. The empire rewarded integration, and slowly, resistance began dissolving from within. This process was especially powerful because Rome understood human ambition. Most people do not fight forever if survival, status, and opportunity become available through cooperation. Rome exploited this reality relentlessly. Conquered warriors became auxiliary soldiers. Provincial leaders became Roman administrators. Foreign nobles entered Roman politics. Local merchants grew wealthy through imperial trade. Communities gained protection beneath Roman law. And over generations, entire populations started identifying with Rome instead of resisting it. This was psychological conquest at its highest level. The empire transformed enemies into stakeholders inside the Roman system. Nowhere was this more visible than inside the Roman military itself. As the empire expanded across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, increasing numbers of non-Romans filled its ranks. Gauls, Germans, Iberians, Thracians, Syrians, Numidians, and countless other peoples eventually served under Roman banners. Some joined for survival. Others sought citizenship, wealth, stability, or prestige. But once integrated into the Roman military machine, these former outsiders became part of something enormous. Discipline reshaped them. Training reshaped them. Roman identity reshaped them. The empire slowly created soldiers whose loyalty no longer belonged to tribes or kingdoms but to Rome itself. That gave Rome extraordinary resilience. Every conquest increased Rome's manpower. Every defeated enemy became a potential future recruit. Every absorbed population strengthened the empire that once conquered them. Rome was feeding on the civilizations around it, and this strategy made rebellion increasingly difficult over time. Because eventually, conquered regions were no longer occupied entirely by foreign troops. They were often controlled by people whose own fathers or grandfathers had once belonged to the same lands now resisting Rome. The line between conqueror and conquered began disappearing. The empire became a massive system of blended identities. That blending gave Rome incredible durability for centuries. But hidden beneath this success was a dangerous contradiction. The more Rome expanded, the more dependent it became on outsiders to sustain itself. Foreign recruits increasingly filled Roman armies. Provincial influence grew stronger inside imperial politics. The empire that once absorbed conquered peoples slowly began changing under the weight of those same populations. Rome believed it was transforming the world into Rome. Over time, the world began transforming Rome as well. And one day, the empire would discover a terrifying truth. When an empire absorbs everyone, it eventually forgets where it truly ends. The secret war happening inside every Roman victory. From the outside, Rome looked eternal. Triumphal parades filled the streets. Gold stolen from conquered kingdoms glittered beneath the sun. Emperors stood before cheering crowds while defeated enemies marched in chains behind them. Massive temples rose across the empire. Legions guarded borders stretching across continents. To the ancient world, Rome appeared unstoppable. But beneath the marble, beneath the banners, beneath the illusion of order, Rome was constantly at war with itself. That hidden conflict became one of the empire's greatest strengths and one of its deadliest weaknesses at the same time. Because every Roman victory created new paranoia, every conquest created new ambition, every successful general became a potential threat, every expansion increased political instability inside the empire itself. Rome conquered the world while quietly fearing collapse from within. And that fear shaped nearly every decision Roman leaders made. The Roman political system was brutal long before emperors ruled it. During the days of the Republic, powerful families competed endlessly for influence, military glory, and public loyalty. Alliances formed and shattered constantly. Rival politicians destroyed each other through manipulation, corruption, blackmail, and violence. Success in Rome attracted admiration for only a moment before it attracted enemies. Then the empire expanded beyond anything the old system could safely control. Suddenly, generals commanded enormous armies loyal not merely to Rome, but to the men paying and leading them personally. Victorious commanders returned from foreign wars with wealth, popularity, and military support powerful enough to challenge the state itself. That changed Roman history forever. The empire became trapped inside a terrifying cycle. Rome needed successful generals to survive external threats. Successful generals became internal threats themselves. No figure represented this danger more dramatically than Julius Caesar. Caesar conquered vast territories across Gaul with extraordinary military brilliance. His victories expanded Roman power enormously. Citizens celebrated him. Soldiers adored him. His reputation became legendary across the Republic, and that terrified Rome's political elite because they understood something deeply dangerous. An admired Roman commander with loyal armies could overthrow the entire system. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his forces, Rome entered one of the most consequential civil wars in human history. Romans slaughtered Romans. The Republic fractured beneath ambition, fear, and political desperation. Eventually, Caesar emerged victorious, only to be assassinated by senators who believed they were saving Rome from tyranny. But the violence did not end. It escalated. More civil wars followed, more executions, more betrayals, more political purges. Entire families vanished. Rivals hunted each other across the Mediterranean. The empire increasingly normalized internal bloodshed as part of maintaining power. This became Rome's hidden battlefield. While legions conquered foreign nations, political warfare consumed the empire internally. Emperors lived surrounded by paranoia. Assassination became a constant possibility. Palace conspiracies spread through the government like infection. Praetorian guards responsible for protecting emperors sometimes murdered them instead. Loyal advisors became suspects overnight. Military commanders balanced ambition carefully, knowing too much success could trigger fear from Rome itself. The empire projected stability outwardly, while internally operating through constant tension. And strangely enough, this instability also strengthened Rome temporarily. Why? Because fear created vigilance. Roman leaders became obsessed with control. Intelligence networks expanded. Political threats were monitored aggressively. Propaganda shaped public perception. Military loyalty became central to survival. Rome developed sophisticated systems of surveillance, influence, and authority because the empire constantly feared enemies both outside and inside its borders. But there was a cost. A civilization built on permanent suspicion eventually begins consuming itself psychologically. Trust disappears. Institutions weaken. Power becomes more important than stability. Short-term survival replaces long-term vision. And slowly, the empire that once mastered external conquest became increasingly vulnerable to internal decay. Rome had conquered kingdoms, tribes, deserts, mountains, and oceans. But the most dangerous enemy Rome ever faced was the fear growing inside its own walls. The moment Rome became too powerful to survive. At the height of its power, the Roman Empire controlled nearly everything the ancient world believed impossible to control. Its territories stretched across 3 continents. Legions guarded deserts, forests, rivers, mountains, and coastlines separated by thousands of miles. Roman law shaped entire civilizations. Trade routes flooded the empire with wealth from every direction. Massive cities pulsed with political authority, military organization, and economic power unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. To outsiders, Rome looked invincible. But hidden beneath that greatness was a terrifying reality. The empire had become too large to stop feeding itself. That was the moment Rome crossed the line from expansion into dependency. For centuries, conquest had strengthened the empire. Victories brought slaves, gold, resources, land, taxes, and political prestige. Expansion fueled the Roman economy and rewarded military loyalty. Every successful campaign created momentum for the next one. But eventually, Rome discovered something dangerous about endless growth. An empire built through expansion begins collapsing when expansion slows down. By the 2nd century AD, Rome faced a problem no battlefield victory could fully solve. The empire had reached enormous territorial limits. There were fewer profitable lands left to conquer. Military campaigns became more expensive. Borders grew harder to defend. Supply systems stretched across impossible distances. Communication slowed. Corruption increased inside provincial administrations. And everywhere along the frontiers, pressure continued rising. Germanic tribes tested northern borders relentlessly. Eastern powers challenged Roman influence repeatedly. Internal revolts erupted unpredictably. Civil wars consumed resources that should have defended the empire itself. Rome was no longer expanding faster than its problems. Now it was struggling merely to maintain what already existed. That shift changed everything. The empire responded the only way it knew how, with more military force, more taxation, more control, more bureaucracy. But every solution created new strain. Higher taxes devastated local populations. Economic instability weakened trade. Currency lost value through inflation. Political corruption spread deeper into imperial institutions. Armies demanded increasing resources and loyalty payments. The Roman machine that once generated unstoppable momentum now required enormous energy simply to keep functioning. And still, the empire refused to slow down, because Rome had become psychologically trapped by its own identity. The empire no longer knew how to exist without dominance. For generations, Roman authority depended on projecting strength constantly. Weakness invited rebellion, retreat invited invasion, hesitation invited political chaos. Emperors understood that appearing vulnerable could destroy them faster than foreign enemies ever could. So Rome continued stretching itself further. More soldiers, more borders, more campaigns, more pressure, until the system itself began cracking beneath its own weight. Then came the crisis of the 3rd century. The empire nearly collapsed into complete fragmentation. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed. Some ruled only months before assassination. Civil wars erupted repeatedly. Foreign invasions intensified. Economic catastrophe spread across provinces. Entire regions broke away from Roman authority temporarily, while plague, instability, and fear consumed the empire from within. For a moment, it looked like Rome was finally dying. And yet, even then, the empire fought desperately to survive. That refusal to surrender remained both Rome's greatest strength and its greatest curse. Because Rome had spent centuries building a civilization designed to endure every external threat imaginable, while slowly becoming incapable of escaping the consequences of its own success. The empire conquered so much territory that defending it became impossible. It centralized so much power that corruption became inevitable. It depended so heavily on military strength that politics itself became militarized. It expanded so relentlessly that peace itself became economically dangerous. Rome had mastered survival against enemies. But now Rome faced something far more terrifying, a system powerful enough to dominate the world, yet too massive to save itself from exhaustion. Rome never truly fell. For centuries, people have repeated the same sentence as if it were a simple fact of history. The Roman Empire fell. But what if that is not entirely true? What if Rome never truly disappeared? Because when most people imagine the end of Rome, they picture burning cities, collapsing temples, barbarian invasions, and emperors losing control of a dying empire. They imagine a civilization erased by time, buried beneath ruins, and forgotten by the modern world. That is the illusion. The empire collapsed physically. Its strategy survived. And in many ways, that strategy still governs the modern world. Look carefully at what made Rome so powerful. Not merely armies, not merely conquest, systems, control through infrastructure, power through economics, psychological domination, political influence, strategic alliances, cultural absorption, information networks, military projection, endurance through adaptation. Rome discovered that true power is not about destroying enemies quickly. It is about building systems so vast, so integrated, and so psychologically overwhelming that resistance eventually feels impossible. That idea never died. Modern superpowers still depend on the same principles Rome perfected centuries ago. Roads became highways. Imperial messengers became global communication networks. Roman logistics evolved into industrial supply chains capable of sustaining military presence across entire continents. Economic dependence replaced direct occupation in many regions. Political influence became more effective than open conquest. Even the psychology remains familiar. Nations still project strength to discourage resistance. Governments still fear appearing weak. Military alliances still function as systems of influence and control. Economic pressure still weakens enemies before conflict begins. Infrastructure still determines who dominates the world. The methods changed. The blueprint survived. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is this. Rome's greatest strategy was never military superiority. It was adaptability. The empire survived disasters that should have destroyed it because Rome constantly transformed itself under pressure. Defeats became lessons. Crises became restructuring opportunities. Enemies became future allies, soldiers, or citizens. Rome evolved faster than the civilizations surrounding it. That principle remains terrifyingly relevant today. The powers that endure are rarely the ones that never suffer failure. They are the ones capable of absorbing shock without collapsing psychologically. That was Rome's true secret. Not invincibility, resilience. And once you understand that, Roman history begins to feel less like ancient history and more like a warning echoing across centuries. Because Rome also revealed the danger hidden inside endless expansion, permanent militarization, political paranoia, and systems built entirely around maintaining dominance. The empire became so obsessed with surviving every threat that eventually survival itself consumed it. That contradiction still exists in powerful nations today. The same systems that create global dominance can slowly produce exhaustion, instability, dependence, internal division, and fear beneath the surface of strength. Rome understood how to conquer the world, but Rome also proved that no civilization can expand forever without paying a price. And yet, despite everything, the empire left behind something extraordinary. Not just ruins, not just monuments, not just history, a way of thinking about power itself. That is why Rome still fascinates humanity after 2,000 years. Its armies disappeared, its emperors vanished, its borders dissolved. But the strategies, ambitions, fears, and systems that once drove the Roman Empire still move quietly through the foundations of the modern world. The legions are gone. The empire is not. The footsteps of Rome still echo through history, and perhaps through our future as well. The end of Rome was never truly the end. It was only the moment the empire became invisible.